My beloved child, pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear was never meant to pass you by unnoticed. Do not rush away. Do not let the noise around you pull you from this moment. Something has been written for you in secret, something your heart has been trying to sense before your mind could understand it. And tonight, before midnight closes the door on this day, heaven is allowing you to hear the words your soulmate could not bring themselves to say aloud. There is a letter. Not an ordinary letter. Not a careless collection of sentences written in a passing moment. This letter was born from silence, from regret, from longing, and from the kind of love that becomes heavier when it is hidden. Your soulmate wrote it when no one was watching. They wrote it after staring at a blank page for longer than they expected. They began one sentence, crossed it out, tried again, and then stopped because their hands started trembling. What they wanted to tell you was too real. What they had been hiding had finally become too powerful to contain. And the first line they wrote was your name. Your soulmate did not write this letter because they had suddenly become fearless. They wrote it because the fear of losing you had finally become greater than the fear of telling you the truth. For so long, they convinced themselves that silence was safer. They believed distance would protect them. They believed time would erase what they felt. But every attempt to move forward only brought them back to the same place, the memory of you. They tried to distract themselves. They smiled in rooms where they felt empty. They answered questions with words that sounded convincing. They told others they were fine. But when night came and the world grew quiet, their heart became honest again. And in that honesty, there was only you. Listen carefully, because the letter does not begin with a promise. It begins with a confession. They wrote, I do not know whether I still have the right to speak to you, but I can no longer pretend that you meant less to me than you did. Then they stopped. Those words remained on the page while they walked away, paced across the room, and tried to gather the courage to continue. They had imagined writing to you many times before, but imagination was easier than truth. In their mind, the words sounded perfect. On the page, every sentence exposed something they had spent months, perhaps years, trying to hide. They were not only writing about love. They were writing about the moment they realized they had misunderstood you. They were writing about the choice they wished they could change. They were writing about something another person told them, something that shaped their actions, influenced their silence, and made them question a connection their soul had already recognized. But that is not the deepest part of what happened. The deepest part is what they discovered afterward. Your soulmate recently learned that the story they had accepted about you was incomplete. Certain words had been removed. Certain details had been twisted. A moment that made you appear distant was not what it seemed. A decision they believed came from indifference actually came from pain. And the more they uncovered, the more they realized that you had been carrying a truth alone. That realization broke something open inside them. They saw your past differently. They remembered conversations they once judged too quickly. They replayed your silence and finally understood that it was not coldness. It was restraint. They remembered the way you pulled back, and they realized you had not stopped caring. You were protecting yourself from being wounded again. For the first time, they understood how much strength it took for you to walk away without saying everything you could have said. And that understanding led them to the letter. My child, there are moments when heaven does not force two souls together, but it allows truth to rise between them. Truth is rising now. It is moving through hidden conversations, unexpected memories, dreams that feel more vivid than usual, and sudden emotions that neither of you can explain. You may have felt it. A heaviness that did not belong to you. A sudden thought of them when you were focused on something else. A memory returning with unusual clarity. A strange feeling that someone was speaking to you without words. These moments were not instructions to abandon your wisdom or chase what has not yet approached you. They were reminders that an unfinished truth still exists between two hearts. Your soulmate has felt it too. They tried to ignore it at first. They told themselves it was nostalgia. They blamed the season, the music, the loneliness of certain hours. But then your presence began appearing everywhere, not physically, but in details. A phrase someone used sounded like something you once said. A familiar song played at the exact moment they were thinking about the past. They saw someone wearing a color you often wore, and for one breath, they forgot where they were. Then came the dream. This is where the letter changed. Your soulmate dreamed they were standing in a place that felt familiar but could not be identified. The sky was dark, yet the path ahead of them was lit. At the end of that path, you were standing with your back turned. They called your name, but no sound came out. They tried to move toward you, but every step felt slow, as though the ground itself was asking them to understand something before they could reach you. Then you began walking away. Your soulmate felt panic rise within them. They tried again to call you, and this time a voice emerged, but it was not your name they shouted. They shouted, "I am sorry." At that moment, you stopped. You did not turn around. You simply stopped. Then your soulmate woke with tears in their eyes and your name in their heart. They could not return to sleep. The room felt different. The silence felt alive. And before they could talk themselves out of it, they reached for paper. That was when the second part of the letter was written. I thought I had more time, they wrote. I thought I could wait until I understood everything. I thought the door between us would remain open, even if neither of us walked through it. But now I am afraid that while I was trying to decide what I felt, you were learning how to live without me. That sentence frightened them because it was true. You have changed. Even if you still carry love, you are no longer standing in the same place. You have learned things about yourself. You have survived nights they know nothing about. You have gathered pieces of your heart from situations that nearly convinced you that love would always require you to suffer. You have become more careful with your energy. You no longer confuse inconsistency with mystery. You no longer call waiting a form of devotion when it is slowly draining your peace. Your soulmate can sense this transformation, and it has awakened urgency within them. But the urgency is not only about losing your attention. It is about losing the version of you who would have accepted less than you deserved. They know that if they come toward you now, they cannot arrive with vague words. They cannot offer half-truths, uncertain intentions, or affection that disappears when courage is required. Something within them understands that your heart is still tender, but it is no longer unguarded. This is why the letter became a confession of responsibility. They wrote, "I blamed timing because I was afraid to admit that I was not brave enough. I blamed circumstances because I did not want to face the fact that I listened to voices that did not understand what I felt for you. I kept expecting you to prove what your soul had already shown me." Then they wrote something even more difficult. "I saw your love, and instead of trusting it, I tested it." My child, those words cost them something. They remembered every moment you tried to communicate. Every time you softened your pride. Every time you offered understanding without receiving the same in return. They remembered when you asked for clarity and were given confusion. They remembered when you needed reassurance and were met with distance. They did not understand the weight of those moments then. They understand now. But the letter is not asking you to forget your pain. It is not asking you to return to a place that wounded you. The message within it is deeper than reunion. It is about truth entering a space once ruled by fear. It is about two souls finally seeing the lesson beneath the longing. Because your soulmate's greatest discovery was not simply that they loved you. They discovered why they ran from that love. You touched a place in them that no one else had reached. You saw beyond the personality they showed the world. You noticed when their laughter was forced. You recognized the difference between their anger and their fear. You understood their silence before they explained it. Being seen by you felt beautiful. But it also felt dangerous. They were accustomed to relationships where they could hide behind charm, distance, or control. With you, those defenses began to fail. Your presence invited honesty, and honesty required them to face parts of themselves they had avoided for years. So they told themselves the connection was too intense. They called it complicated. They questioned whether it was real. They searched for flaws in you because facing their own vulnerability felt harder. And when outside voices gave them reasons to doubt, they accepted those reasons because doubt was easier than surrender. But love did not disappear. It waited beneath their resistance. It followed them into every connection they tried to build afterward. Not because no one else had value, but because something remained unresolved within them. They kept comparing feelings they would never admit they were comparing. They noticed when conversations lacked the depth they had with you. They noticed when laughter did not reach the same hidden part of their heart. And each comparison led them back to the truth. You were not difficult to love. You were difficult to deceive. Your soul recognized when their words and actions did not match. You could feel what they were not saying. That made them uncomfortable because they could not give you an illusion and call it intimacy. The letter says, "You asked me to be real, and I thought you were asking too much. Now I understand that you were asking for the one thing I should have offered freely." But there is something else written below that sentence. Something they almost erased. They wrote it lightly, as though they were afraid even the page might judge them. "I was jealous of your strength." This may surprise you. Your soulmate admired the way you continued even when you were hurting. They admired how deeply you could feel without allowing bitterness to become your identity. But admiration slowly became fear. They wondered whether you truly needed them. They wondered whether they could offer enough to someone who had learned how to stand alone. Instead of telling you this, they became distant. Instead of saying, "I am afraid I will disappoint you," they acted as though they did not care. Instead of saying, "Your power makes me question my own worth," they searched for reasons to make you doubt yours. They regret this more than the letter can fully express. Because they now know your strength was never a threat. It was an invitation. You did not want them to compete with you. You wanted them to stand beside you. You did not need perfection. You needed honesty. You did not expect them to arrive without wounds. You only wanted them to stop using those wounds as an excuse to wound you. The night grew later as they wrote. At one point, they looked at the clock. That is why midnight matters. Not because something terrible will happen when the day ends. Not because love follows a magical deadline. Midnight matters because it represents the boundary they have placed before themselves. They promise that before this day passes, they will make a decision about the letter. Keep it hidden. Destroy it. Or allow its truth to begin moving toward you. Your soulmate folded the pages once, then opened them again. They read every line. They added a sentence. They removed another. They held the letter near their heart as though trying to decide whether it was a goodbye or a beginning. But even they do not fully know yet. That is the tension heaven is revealing. Your soulmate believes the letter is about reaching you, but the deeper purpose may be about transforming them. Writing it forced them to see what they had avoided. It forced them to name their patterns. It forced them to admit that love cannot survive forever on unspoken intentions. The letter continues. I do not know what your life looks like now. I do not know whether someone else has made you feel safe in the ways I failed to. I do not know whether hearing from me would heal something or disturb the peace you worked so hard to build. That is why I have stayed silent. But silence has also become a lie. Then they asked a question. A question directed toward you, though you have not yet seen the page. Did you ever feel me thinking about you? Your heart may already know the answer. There were moments when your emotions changed without warning. Moments when you felt an ache you could not trace. Moments when you imagined a conversation with them and wondered why it felt so vivid. You may have dismissed these experiences, and perhaps that was wise. Not every feeling is a sign, and not every memory is an instruction. But some emotions arrive because your heart is processing what your mind has not yet released. Your soulmate has been processing you too. They have imagined what they would say if you stood before them. They have practiced apologies while driving alone. They have typed messages and deleted them. They have opened your picture, stared for a moment, and closed it before anyone could notice. They have wondered whether you still look at the moon when your thoughts become too heavy. They have wondered whether you still remember the smallest details, the joke no one else understood, the place where time seemed to slow, the conversation that ended before either of you said what mattered. But there is one memory above all others that returned while they were writing. It was a moment when you looked at them differently. Not with anger. Not with disappointment. with acceptance. They did not understand it then, but they understand it now. You were silently accepting that they were not ready to meet you where you stood. You were letting go while part of you still loved them. That memory is why the page carries a tear stain. They realized you did not leave because you stopped caring. You left because staying was teaching you to abandon yourself. And your soulmate now sees the cost of what they failed to choose. But listen closely, because the letter contains more than remorse. Near the final page, the tone changes. Something stronger enters the words. A new kind of courage begins to appear. They write about what they have been doing in your absence. Not everything has changed, but something has begun. They have distanced themselves from a person whose influence created confusion. They have confronted a family belief that taught them love must always involve control. They have admitted to someone close to them that they made a mistake with you. And the response they received was not what they expected. The person listened quietly. Then they said, "You speak about them as though you never stopped loving them." Your soulmate did not answer. They did not need to. The silence said everything. But the person continued. They asked your soulmate why, if the feeling was still alive, they had not spoken honestly. Your soulmate gave all the familiar reasons: timing, uncertainty, fear of rejection, concern about disturbing your life. Then the person asked one final question. Are you protecting their peace, or are you protecting yourself from the answer? That question followed your soulmate home. It sat beside them while they wrote. It appears in the letter, circled twice. Because now they know that what they called consideration may partly have been fear. They were afraid you might not respond. They were afraid you might respond with kindness but no desire to return. They were afraid you might tell them that the love they once took for granted had become a lesson you had already completed. Yet beneath all those fears is another possibility. The possibility that you still feel something too. The possibility that truth, even if it does not restore the past, could release both of you from wondering. The possibility that this letter was never meant to pull you backward, but to open a door toward something more honest than what came before. My child, heaven is not promising an outcome. It is revealing a turning point. There is free will in this story. There are choices still being made. There are wounds that require more than beautiful words. A letter can reveal truth, but only actions can prove transformation. Your soulmate knows this. That is why the final page is different from the others. It does not say, "Please take me back." It does not demand forgiveness. It does not ask you to forget. Instead, they wrote, "I want to become someone who no longer hides when love asks for courage. Whether or not you open the door to me, knowing you changed the way I understand love. You showed me that intimacy is not being admired. It is being known and choosing not to run." Then comes the line they struggled longest to write. The line that made them put the pen down. The line that remained unfinished for nearly an hour. I still. That was all. 2 words and an empty space. They stared at it as midnight drew closer. They knew what belonged after those words. But writing it would make everything real. I still love you. I still wait for you. I still believe in us. I still carry the future we once imagined. Which truth did they finally choose? The answer is on the page now. But before they completed it, something happened. Their phone lit up. A name appeared on the screen. Someone they had not expected to hear from. Someone connected to you. Your soulmate froze because the timing felt impossible. The letter was open before them. Your name was written across the first page. Their heart was already exposed in ink. And now this person was calling. They hesitated before answering. When they finally did, the voice on the other end did not begin with a greeting. It began with a sentence that changed the meaning of everything your soulmate had just written. The person said, "There is something about them you need to know before you send that letter." Your soulmate looked down at the unfinished final line. Their hand tightened around the phone. Because what they heard next was not about your past. It was about something happening in your life right now. Something that could either make them seal the letter immediately, or stop them from ever sending it at all.